Because of the sheer complexity in them, I thought I'd do a separate video on the hands alone, just to give you a bit of a breakdown on how they've been put together and how they operate and some of the difficulties that I struck with them. The little grub screws that you can see in the fingers here, they are all real grub screws which hold, again, a real piston that does actually spin. There's no cabling associated with it in terms of this sort of setup, but they do match the original as far as that sort of stuff's concerned. There are a few different versions in the way this has been put together. The difference between the hand in the first and second films is actually quite different. And a lot of that comes down to the difference in the scene where you see him pull the flesh off his arm that revealed an animatronic version that was controlled by a guy sort of laying on his back on the ground. So what I came up with is when I did the fingers, they're essentially the same on both sides, with the only real difference being the left and right orientation of how they go together. It was really just a matter of getting them looking right and then being able to sort of lock those fingers into position. The way I've done that is with these stainless steel bolts, which are loose on one side and then have a thread tapped into the opposite side so that I can tighten those down to hold their position. So they can be loosened off so they have a free movement, and then they can be tightened back up again to hold the position that I want them to stay in. There is a little bit of movement in it you can do once it's been tightened up, but it tends to go, as you go against the tightness of the thread, it ends up loose, and if you push away from the tightness of the thread, it ends up being a lot tighter. So I have a tendency to just position them where I want them to be and then tweak them up so they hold the tightness of position. The least limited movement is in the thumb. You can see there's a piece there that I've actually taken off for the moment. That again appears in the original and goes on the inside in there normally, and then when that's tightened up, it does sort of restrict how much movement's in the thumb. You can see that it sort of cuts that down quite a bit. You've still got full adjustment in the two front parts of it, but it just limits this back section. Apart from that, what I've done is made up a custom Allen key. You can see it's just got the regular end on one end and another piece which I've bent over and made really short. That's so that I can get into these in-between sections and tighten those up and lock them in position. You can see they're loose there at the moment. It just means that that shorter key can get in there and tighten them up when I'm ready to tighten them up. Mini rod ends that are here are made from stainless steel, and then the little mini connecting pins that I've made up here are essentially a flathead nail that I've crimped off that I've used as a control sort of mounting point for where that little piston connects. The other thing with the casting of the aluminium is that these little details that would normally appear here on the original, they're far too lightweight to be made out of the aluminium, so those two are a little extension pin that I've drilled a hole in and sort of countersunk them into so that it gives it a mounting point that's a lot more solid. The other thing is in the wrist. These universal joints are joints that I've made up basically by hand. There's a couple of different versions where these ones are a ball joint. They kind of look like a little chess piece, like a pawn piece that sits on the top there, and they sort of rotate in a ball and cuff sort of arrangement. I have used a couple of those in the foot and ankle arrangement, but I found that with the wrist they limited the movement a lot more. So by going with this universal joint sort of arrangement, it does get a little bit more movement out of it by comparison. I really only have a small handful of tools that I work with. Most of them are Allen keys. That one's a ratchet spanner that I use for the nut inside his head, purely for convenience because it means I don't have to wrestle around too much getting it to tighten up. I've got two Allen keys that I use for the hand and fingers. One that's a bit larger that I use for the joints in the arms and legs and that sort of thing. And then there's a set that I use for the large joints in the elbows and knees. And then the largest one I use is for the mounting of the rod ends in and around the chest cavity, and that's also the same size one that holds the bolt that mounts his jaw on. The only other custom tool I tend to use with him is one of these T-spanners, which has just had a modified Allen key that's been cut off so that it fits inside there, so that it can reach up inside to tension the nut that's inside his elbow. I also use a pair of pliers that are a little bit different to what you may have seen before. Some of you might recognise these for what they actually are, which is a crimping pair of pliers for snapping off glass. I found the shape that it has is perfect for what I need for getting the gearbox section off the side of his head. So apart from using just a regular screwdriver or something like that for convenience, that tends to be the basic handful of tools that I use whenever I need to make any adjustments on him. In the next video, I'm going to tackle some repairs that need doing on the base. The light bar around the outside edge that you can see there, for some reason or other, has seemed to stop working. So I'm going to see whether or not that's just a loose wire or whether or not I need to buy a replacement for that outer band. The other thing I want to get working again is the fire display, which I'm pretty sure needs nothing more than a bit of a clean and a de-dust, just like everything else that I've done with it. So that'll be the update for this time, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.